All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Cowboy, aka Nick, and we have EM Burlingame with us today. Always a pleasure, EM. How you doing, sir?
Doing good, and you?
Doing good. Doing good. Before we get started, go ahead, take a look in the description. We got some goodies in there. We got the algorithm that I built. Take a look at that. You get to see me build it, turn it into code, and I show you tools that traders use to connect it to their exchange so they can trade while they're either sleeping, golfing, or doing whatever. Now, we also have EM's information in there. We got Substack, we got your channels. So that's a great way to get a hold of EM's excellent work. Really enjoying the authorship of your stuff, EM. Even the fiction, although I don't know that it's all fiction, and otherwise. So it's nice to kind of sit back and read some of that stuff. Been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
How you doing over these last couple weeks? We haven't had as much time to chat lately.
Been good. Been trying to see what's happening in the world that's we're being distracted from.
What do you think? If you had to put your finger towards a region or your mind towards a concept in that sense, what would it be?
Europe and the UK and the Anglosphere and the Eurosphere is all in on slaughtering off their young men in war. That's unwinnable. That they will also never support fully to even win, even if winning was possible. And the U.S. is being driven inexorably into hot civil war.
Well, man, that sounds awesome. Sounds like a blast.
For the same purpose, right? To kill off the native sons.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like, is it a race thing? Do they want to kill white people? Like, is it a culture thing? They want to kill off the culture? Like,
I think it's uglier than that. I think what it is that they see the largest pool of wealth ever accumulated in the boomers and the older Gen X, and they want to steal it. And to do that, they need the descendants of the boomers and the older Gen X dead.
Okay, fair enough. So it's about money.
It's always about money.
So if it was like, it doesn't matter who the culture is, the color, because you did a really good post. I still get to look at Twitter. I'm banned from Twitter, but I still get to look at it. And it was like some chick, and she had like a Nazi uniform or something, and it's like, I think you were saying they're trying to bait everybody into like a race war. They're trying to make it about race.
This is a conversation Clay and Tommy and I had yesterday, and Clay and I had at his house out around the bonfire in the backyard a week ago. Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do, and trying to confuse us about, so first off, white people are technically a whole bunch of different races, right? So they're trying to make it a binary color-coded thing. Pale skin, melatonin and lack of melatonin.
Yeah, that's kind of everybody. It seems most people, at least a huge percent of people, need a very simple message, right?
Well, that's not true. The radicals need a simple message. Most people are more sophisticated than that, right? Like the what would be considered the most illiterate, dumbest people on earth tend to turn out to be the smartest people on earth, because they're not filling their mind with all the nonsense and garbage, illusionary lies. They're living a real life, and their understandings of how things and people and nature, et cetera, works is usually vastly more sophisticated than all these linguistically superior individuals. The ones who can spout off facts and data and tables and quotes tend to be the dumber ones.
Well, I suppose if you have too many figures ready to go, then there's not as much thinking. I mean, I'm not saying it's always that way. There's some very smart people who can spout off quotes and tables, but
most of them are not that smart.
Yeah,
virtually every one of those I've ever met has never been that smart. Not really. Yeah. They give the appearance, the illusion of being smart because they have this prodigious memory, but memory does not make you intelligent. It's also like learning to play chess does not teach you strategy. It teaches you memorization. Chess is a game with very strict board and a very limited number of set movements. Chess does not teach strategy. Chess teaches you how to remember complex patterns.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And
This
we
gambit and that
conflate
gambit.
the two, correct? And we conflate the two together. This is the great problem with liberal educations. Liberal educations heavily focus on linguistic capacities and factoids and data points and complete, it's totally left hemisphere, in the Dr. Ian McGilchrist articulations, and it leaves out the right hemisphere, which is necessary for the integration of the facts and the data into context. The facts and data themselves, the historical reference, the books, the quotes, etc., provide absolutely zero context. This is why so many papers, when I was in the academic world doing my PhD studies, virtually all of the papers I read were nonsense. Now, they were all well quoted with, citations, with well done citations, etc. But if you chase all that down, most of it's all circular anyways. It's all references itself in one form or a fashion. And the other piece is that virtually all of the references that were used were just excerpting some segment from a paper or a book or some speech or something that verified, that provided validity to the claim being made by the author of the paper. Whereas if they took the whole context of what they were citing, the work that they were citing, 99% of the time, that didn't actually back up their claim at all.
So would you, like, the following statement, would you think to be accurate? I would say that perhaps Western education or even chess, it's almost a way to, from what you're saying, to apply facts and data to a rigid heuristic without necessarily a critical view, without going beyond that heuristic and those patterns.
Yeah. So give me a second. There's a word, it's called associative knowledge. I believe it's been a long time, 20 years or so since I looked at this part of neuroscience. But in effect, what's happening with the complexity of the world is we are always trying to take complex things and compress them down to some heuristic, some easily run code. Same thing you're doing with your algo trading. You're taking very complex space and trying to reduce it down to a sequence of expressions in an algorithmic formula. Well, that's of course what we do. The problem is that we as linguistic monkeys, we as, liberally educated peoples are relying upon a vast amount of heuristics that are false, verifiably false. And we're educated to believe that as long as you have the heuristic, you're intelligent. No, you're just a monkey who's repeating some shit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's human nature for us to want to categorize as a means of survival.
Well, and also to fit in, right? So if the in group is agreeing to the heuristic, even if it doesn't work, most people want to be part of the in group. And so they'll, hand wave and cognitive dissonance, and they will believe the heuristic, even though right in front of their face. This is why, I watched San Francisco degrade into shit and needles in the streets, literally. Trash, when I say trash, I mean like mattresses and, homemade camps and everything else. I watched it. Why? Because people's cognitive dissonance was kicking in. Why? Because what was the heuristic? We needed to be compassionate and all these different, variants of how they articulated the heuristic. Well, the heuristic was proven right in front of our eyes to be a total and absolute lie, a falsity. But people's cognitive dissonance kicks in and just agrees with the heuristic, even though they can visually see right in front of them every day it getting worse.
Do you think that, excuse me, do you think that the heuristic, it's a tool, as all things are, And so for the audience, like we're using the term heuristic. A heuristic is like basically a rule that you would follow, or if A, then B, then C, right? And in the real
Heuristics are
world,
usually a compression of a set of rules into a single fractal-like rule.
yeah,
Heuristics are rarely, a single rule itself. When you compress down to a heuristic, an algorithmic formula, it's usually got expressions in it that are other heuristics.
and in a sense, it's a simplified view.
Correct.
And it works for me in my world because I just have to be right more than 50% of the time.
Correct. Yeah.
But in the world where people live and die, this is not the way you want to operate, right?
50% ain't good enough.
No. I'm actually a
Yeah.
little higher than 50%, but not just a little. So in the spirit of heuristics, we have one of our individuals in the audience who loves to come on during the show, and this is an AMA format. So this particular show is asking EM your favorite questions. And so Adjunct Emerita, if I'm saying that right, has some questions. First question is, what scholars does EM Burlingame recommend to understand matriarchy?
Well, first off, don't look at scholars.
Okay.
And to be quite frank, this is an individual that's been stalking me across everybody's platform and speaking, very inappropriately in articulating that they've been reading my books, etc. However, what they're spouting, which people send me screenshots, by the way, has nothing to do with anything I've been writing. With respect to matriarchy, you want to understand matriarchy, go talk to some good old women. Really talk to them. And not just from your own community and your own culture. And actually look at the religious belief systems, look at cultural and societal belief systems, and look at how they value healthy, older, leading women versus, the unhealthy, the devouring mother versus the nurturing mother. And the nurturing mother isn't always the touchy-feely kind of mother. Some nurturing mothers are pretty rough and pretty strong because that's what's necessary.
That's my mom. Both my mom and stepmom are both very...
Well, it's more dominant in some cultures, right? Like the English culture and the Scandinavian cultures, the Germanic cultures, the compassionate, nurturing mother is usually pretty rough and tumble. But that's because we come from northern climes historically where we had to be rough and tumble and we had to work together and we had to not be so touchy-feely if we were going to all make it through the winter. Well, if we were going to all make it through raiding season and then later make it through the winter.
Yeah, rough and tumble is a good description for the moms who raised me. So in that spirit, I don't know if we care to answer any more questions from that person or not. That's up to you, Ian.
Okay.
Other people, it's more, yes. It's more like that. Like, what do you think of this author and that theory? And that's an awful lot of effort to.
And they're doing it across every platform. They're spamming and filling everybody. So
yeah, and there's like a lot of big words, and so. That said,
let's look for other people. There's some other folks that have questions. Now, here's the thing. In that question, even from this horrible individual, there's some validity in that question, and I actually respect that. Right? We do need to understand matriarchs, healthy matriarchy, but you're not going to get that in the literature today because all the literature over the last 2 centuries, roughly, has been about unhealthy women and how they're the victims and how they need to be in power and how they need to be empowered. And it's all been against the healthy matriarchs. And that's not just things written by women as women became more and more the dominant force in the liberal arts, but it was also written by men, weak men, estrogenic men who were trying to get laid. And so became academics and wrote papers in favor of unhealthy women for a century and a half.
So a mating strategy is ruining civilization, basically.
Correct. A mating strategy for lower status males and females. Now, you got to applaud it. It's natural, right? It's natural. It's just it's not being checked. And the problem is, back to the earlier part of what you're saying, all of the heuristics we're using around how we assess and value women and men and higher status women and higher status men, etc., are heuristics created by these lower status people in academia over the last 2 centuries who've been putting out heuristics, and the supports and defense for the heuristics is just them trying to get laid.
Oh yeah, I know guys like that. I grew up with one dude like that. He was very effeminate. All his girls were friends. All friends were girls, I mean to say. And he was this guy that, like, you could shove him into a locker. But what he would do is he would sow chaos in the background, spread rumors.
Through the women.
He was very political with everything. He'd always be quick
Estrogenic.
to point out something you did in the past. Like it was like a girl. It was like, you know, I mean,
it's estrogenics. This is what I call the estrogenic, right? It's not just women. It's the worst ones are the estrogenic males, and it's lower status males who are exercising Loki like, right? This is why we have the concept of Loki in Scandinavian mythology. It's why Loki wasn't wiped out, because we need Loki to show us the gaps in our masculine testosterone ways of thinking, and healthy women, by the way.
Oh yeah,
right?
No,
That's why we have the concept of Loki. Well, these are Loki's people. They're deceivers because they don't naturally attract to them the opportunity to pass on their genes. And by the way, you see this in all mammal species. Every single mammal species, you see the same behavior. Well, all pack, social grouping kind of mammal species. So lions, wolves, elephants. Elephants are a little different because they're so there's different kinds of elephants, etc. But even in elephants, you see it in
certainly primates.
All the primates, humans specifically, is the linguistic monkey. But we see this same deceptive breeding strategy. We see it in birds, actually. Like one of the things that was interesting is genetic studies of birds that breed for life and find out, over 80% of the females cheat.
Well, they're starting to find now. There's a really good book. And here's another question before we move on. This is an easy question for you, and then we might go back to that until there's more questions. When are you going to host your own podcast, or do you already have one that I don't know about? And that's from Red Pilled Fiction Factory.
Yeah, it's a great question. Tommy hit me with that yesterday morning that I need to do my own show. I don't think I'm going to do my own show. I don't think I'd be a very good host. I'm honest about that. And the way in which my mind works best is somebody has to ask me a question. Right? When somebody asks a question, then it drives me or makes a comment, then it drives me to have to organize this in a way to articulate, what I understand or what I'm seeing.
It's funny. So, I relate to that. For example, now I can talk about charts and stuff like that all day long. That's easy for me. But at the same time, I'm reflecting what the chart is showing me and commenting on that. I'm not quite as generative of a person. Like I couldn't I can host with you. It's easy. We know each other. I'm not a bad host if I know who I'm talking to, and usually you can spark up a conversation. But to come on and do my own, where it's just me talking about things in the news, I'm better reacting to somebody else's stuff. Like,
The other piece is that I actually like some of you guys, and if I can help you and your audiences understand some things as I see it, it's not always right. Tends to be over time, though. It turns out to be right, at least the things I speak on. If I can help you guys with your audiences, I'd rather do that. I'm honest. The other piece is the show is a full-time thing, and I'm writing, and that's really my commitment. Because as I'm writing, writing is another way of me being forced to really think through a space such that I can articulate it in a way that other people can grasp and then chase down themselves, right? Then they go chase down, was there reality to this? Is there validity to it or not?
I find that's analogous to teaching, because all my life I've been a teacher of some sort. Not all my life, I shouldn't say that,
Mhm.
but at least 50% of my professional life has ended up in a training role. And training has taught me more about a subject than anything else. And I'd imagine being a writer is in a similar vein.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also I'm on Green Beret, and I know what are Green Berets. Green Berets are teachers, first and
Interesting.
foremost. Yeah, we can do all the skills because you can't teach them if you can't do them. And if you don't do them, and the only way you can truly do them is the only way you can truly know them is to do them. And the only way to teach them is to know them. So we have to do, but the goal for what we do in Green Beret specifically is so that we can teach others. Right. The whole purpose of, Deo Presi Liber, right, is the motto for the Green Berets. Most people translate as free the oppressed, but that's not actually the French, because it's actually French. It's not Latin. And the Deo Presi Liber means of the oppressed free. Well, what does that translate to, right? That's French, en français, en anglais. What does that mean? Well, it means of those who have freed themselves of slavery, of oppression. Here's what we're giving. Here's what we're sharing, right? That's what we're trying to teach. We who have broken ourselves free of oppression, here's how we did it, and here's how you can break yourself free of oppression. Because no other people, no one can be broken from oppression by anybody but themselves. Why? Because real oppression is in the mind.
So that's interesting. You have to look back at the different populations that have been oppressed, and that's a conversation that goes into some modern themes. If you look back far enough, pretty much every civilization has been oppressed or enslaved at some point or another, in some way, shape, or form.
Well,
So
and the oppressed always dramatically outnumber the oppressors. Why is that? Because the oppression's in the mind, the illusion of powerlessness, the illusion of hopelessness, the illusion of inferiority.
Yeah, and that starts to diverge into some topics that might upset a lot of our audience. But I think that not to say someone's religion is incorrect, because I would never go there, but I think that the wrong kind of reliance on a religion might kind of push somebody away from what might actually free them. And I know that's like the worst thing for any Christian to hear. But I think a lot of people, even in the Bible, if you were to read it, you might find that just simply believing in something isn't going to fix it all, and you have to do some work. So you always have to watch out for those traps as well.
Well, this gets back to the beginning of the conversation. Just having the heuristic doesn't save you. Particularly if one, the heuristic's wrong, or two, you don't actually understand the heuristic. Right? You can have an equation, very sophisticated, as you know, in trading, right? Let's use trading, my old world, right? I did algorithmic trading, high frequency trading when I was younger. I can have the best formula, the most sophisticated, righteous formula. But if I'm looking at the wrong signals.
Yeah, or for example, the bot traders, everybody wants to take their algorithm, plug it in, have it trade for them, and no one does it. I know very few people who do it. I'm set up to do it. I can do it. I don't do it. Not very often. And a lot of it has to do with the amount of time that it's going to take me to test it. And if all I were doing is trading and nothing else, then I would deal with it. But here's what needs to be understood about that. And this fits into, it's analogous to everything else we're talking about. The heuristic, aka the trading algorithm, you have to know when to use it if you want to have a profitable book. So there are many times when I would never, I'll get signals and I do not trade them, because I know based on this, it might be because the market just closed. It might be because it's a holiday week. It might be a lot of things where the substrate on which that heuristic is applied is not stable.
If the context is not right, it doesn't matter how good the heuristic is. This again gets back to the beginning of the conversation, right? And this is right hemisphere. and estrogenic peoples, and this has been done in lots of neural studies, right? Estrogenic peoples tend to be left hemisphere dominant. Facts, data, details, heuristics. And testosterone-based individuals tend to be right hemisphere dominant. Context. Well, that would make a lot of sense historically, you know, across eons of time, that women would focus, you know, the women and the lower status males who weren't out doing conflict and fighting would be keeping all of these facts and datas and details because they needed them and they could use them. Whereas the war fighters, the builders, the creators have to actually have context for everything, because if they get something wrong, right? So when something's reduced down to a heuristic, it's been very well adjudicated in reality, except for all this stuff over the last couple centuries of all this academia stuff, right? So in the world of man, if I get a heuristic wrong, I might end up dead in a bar fight, or in a traffic accident, or on a work site accident, or in a war that we shouldn't have gone into, or in a war that we should have gone into, but in a battle that I shouldn't have approached that way. So it gets to, which is very similar to what you just said about your trading heuristics. Heuristics, right, but the context is everything. The estrogenic don't tend to have context. Now, the help back to the freaking individual I don't want to give any moment of my life to, but the healthy matriarchs do understand the importance of context. And they look to men, they look to the males around them, the healthy males around them whose lives are on the line for getting the context wrong in the application of heuristic. And those matriarchs are constantly probing back and forth, you know, do we use this? Do we move these assets here? Do we move these relationships here? Do we do this? You know, is the context right for us to use this heuristic or use this heuristic or this heuristic? And this is the balance between men and women, and between, you know, lower status and higher status. You know, matriarch's a higher status person, whether they were born there or earned themselves there, doesn't matter. They still have to be sufficient. And that's the balance. You know, that's, you know, what makes good traders good traders. They've got a whole portfolio of heuristics, and then they understand the context in which to use different heuristics to apply to the market. Well, it's the same in all things, right? What is the market? The market is a fractal for all human experiences, because what is the market? It is actually a reflection of all human experiences as they play out in the world.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There was a time when I was new to trading and I was so fascinated with it. I was comparing it to everything in life. It applies. And the market is merely a, in the current environment, it's a digital expression of like what happens. Yeah.
Of all things. It's the signal of all signals. This is what Adam Smith was talking about, the invisible hand of the market. But everybody, and there's a reason why this has been done, again, back to context. Adam Smith wrote a book before that, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. That was the context for the book, The Wealth of Nations. If you're going to understand the wealth of nations, the heuristics, you have to read The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which is the context first. But intentionally, it's not taught that way.
Well, yeah, and this also applies to why you really shouldn't have academics running life and death situations.
Yeah, but since World War II, that's been the case. We've just handed it all off to them.
Yeah, there's no risk to them. They get to sit in their ivory towers. Of course, you know, I'm not saying that I'm not saying they're all like this. You know, there are those who I believe maybe their brother is going to go fight in that war. Like, they do have real risk, but if you don't have a good portion of,
go ahead.
It'll never be the same as somebody who's in the trench, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if you don't have people who've been in the trenches involved in the decision making, you're just going to end up kind of where we are.
So absolutely true. So if you don't have men involved in your academia who've been to war and I don't mean as support, but in front line of war, your academia is only so valid. It's the same thing with women. If you're not having and rearing properly, having and raising children, you're not in the trenches of womanhood. And you don't understand, it's the same gap and lack. And yes, women are at war. Women are at war with women constantly, perpetually, in every way. And the front lines of that is motherhood, and then grandmotherhood, even more so.
I keep wanting to tell the story of my great grandparents, but before we get to that, I have a question from John Otter, who it relates directly to what we're talking about. Within the right-left brain and feminine-masculine subject, is there a significance to the concept of failing forward?
I don't think I quite understand the question, the failing forward part.
Sure, that's I can give you that piece.
Okay.
So failing forward is what we see happening in politics right now. You have politics and bureaucracy. You have people who do a really terrible job, and they keep getting promoted. Right? It's like
so we call it promoting above peers or promoting above capacities, or I still don't see how that I still don't see. Okay, so yes, the people who are getting promoted are the ones who really have who can spout off a whole portfolio of heuristics and then tables of and bibliographies of citations for why that heuristic is valid. However, everything's going to crap. Everything is failing because everything lacks context. This is the problem with late stage empires, late stage corporations, late stage anything, right? Is that they've developed a very sophisticated, very broad and comprehensive set of heuristics, but they've forgotten the context as to why those heuristics were developed. And the people who come up behind fall in on these institutions who are the keepers of these, sophisticated, tailored heuristics, tailored to the purpose of that institution. And they believe that if they just if they just continue to use the heuristic, everything's going to be fine. This gets back to your trading strategy. That's how you fail.
Oh yeah, right? That's how I initially failed my first time.
Yeah. Because you think you got it and the heuristic's always going to work. No, the heuristic's only going to work in the proper context. We don't even teach the context anymore. That goes to the piece I wrote this morning about how we've all, we're all running around suffering from orphan syndrome because we've been denied access to and recognition of our civilization. Right? What is our civilization? Our civilization is the context whereby we use the heuristics also coded within our civilization.
Yeah, and this is why we have to not push our youth aside, because they're the ones that are like, okay, I used to say when I was a kid, I was catching everything on raw feed. And as children, we don't have context other than what we see. However, we're seeing what there is to see without context also, which gives you almost a pure form of what's going on. Now, it might not be that much because you don't know that much, but at least you're able to pick up on things almost from a sublingual level, right? And then as the kids begin to have some experiences and they're going to school and all this, they get a piece, they have a better view in a sense of what's happening in the classroom than the parents do, because they're in the classroom all day and the parents are not. Now, they may not know a lot of things that the parents know. And of course, the experience of a parent is always going to surpass the child in many, many ways. But when you have these kids going into the world, it's really easy to dismiss them. It's easy for me. I'm like in my mid 40s, and I hear these kids complain about this and that and the other. I'm like, go to work, But the reality is that whatever they're dealing with, it might be very different to what I dealt with 20, 25 years ago. And it's because they're in it and I'm not.
But back to the beginning part of or earlier part of this conversation, they're not in it. They've been taught the wrong heuristics, and they've never been taught how to look for context. They've never been taught about context whatsoever. And they've been denied access or recognition of their civilization as anything else but an evil.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. Yeah, the youth have been at an impressionable age given an inverted heuristic. So then there are those of us who see through it, and we are few and far between. And even we get fooled by it. You and I talked about this a few shows ago, where we didn't go to school when there were trophies given away for nothing, right? We didn't get the participation trophies. And yet somehow you, a number of years before me, and me a number of years before these trophies, still got the white guilt, white people are bad thing.
Male guilt.
Male guilt. Yeah, and women and all. So it was like whatever it was insidious, but it was there, and that heuristic was implanted. So yeah, you know, it is. I always had in that, and not to say I feel like I have delusions of any kind of grandeur, but like, you know how in the Matrix in the beginning, he always felt there was something wrong, but he just didn't know what it was. And that's, I remember distinctly, especially getting to middle school, but even in elementary school, I knew there was just something messed up. I had this liberal teacher from New York. She always favored the girls and treated the guys like trash, except for that one feminine guy. She was always really nice to him. Like, you know, I just, and I started to see it with other teachers, and there was a general theme of this. And I'm like, I'm like, this, I don't agree with any of this stuff. And a lot of it probably had to do with my raising and my parents being, you know, pretty good people and pretty strong with the way that they saw things. But I think a lot of kids don't have that guidance, and they just fall right into whatever that heuristic is that they're given.
Yeah, until they get old enough. You know, I went down the white guilt and male guilt pathway. I went down the whole, you know, and I'm 58 years old. They were already heavily teaching it, and I got it at home. And it took me 40 years to break free of all of that. And what did I do? Again, the piece I put up on Substack and Twitter this morning, right? I was orphaned. I was orphaned in my own culture, in my own society, my own civilization, my own land. I was also made a foster kid and almost technically orphaned. It's called orphan syndrome. It's a known, it's not in the DSM, should be, but it's a known thing around the world. You know, orphans demonstrate certain personality behaviors, certain cognitive and neuroemotive behaviors. I went away, I studied foreign languages. I went away to other countries. I studied their histories and cultures better than I knew my own, better than many of the people from that culture and history, or, you know, from that culture and society. I didn't speak the languages better than they did, but I could speak with them in their own languages, but I knew their histories and I knew, you know, the nuances of their cultures better. But no matter what I did, I could never become Japanese or Chinese or Vietnamese. It was never going to happen. I couldn't become Russian. Now, Russian was closer, a lot closer, right? Culturally, society-wise, but it's still very different. I am English. My civilization is English, not even European.
I'm surprised you didn't pick up more Russian to get to know some of those Slavic girls. You know, they're awfully attractive.
Well, that's actually why I started Russian when I was younger. And then I dated a few and I was afraid for my life. And I went to Asia. It's only when I came back to my own civilization, the English civilization, and then parsed that out from European civilization and realized those are two very different things. And they've been enemies for thousands of years. It's only when that happened that I started to recognize all of the healthy heuristics that I have that I never learned in school, not even all the way up to doctoral studies. And I also learned the context that even had I had all of these heuristics for how to live and be with people, et cetera, they wouldn't have worked in these other civilizations and societies because the context was different. The social context, the social contract differences, the ways in which they organize and coordinate themselves because of their social contract, right? It's only when I came back to my English civilization that I realized, wow, I've got this whole portfolio of heuristics that work And if I cut out all the noise that I was educated on and just look at my history, my people's history and the culture and society and civilization, and really go back to just really studying history, and then also kind of with the, the eye that I had been given at war and doing all these other things, and having been in other cultures where you get to learn about yourself because they have a whole different way of seeing you than you have. And so I come back to the English civilization and we finally get to my English civilization. And I'm like, wow, it's rich and everything we need. All the heuristics are there. All the context is there. And it's why they're working so hard to eradicate it. Because we don't need education. We don't, yes, we need some education for some things, but we don't need any education like they do it. It's intentionally designed to deny us access to 1,000-year-old heuristics that work and 1,000+ year, 2,000-year plus context that's proven to be true, which you can't go back and rewrite context. It happened, and it happened in this way. And these heuristics, this little handful of portfolio heuristics, came out of that contextual event. And we're all using them today in everything. It's in everything. And then by doing that, I wasn't an orphan anymore. And I felt love, and I felt family, and I felt connection. And all those things that I'd been lacking all those years, and all the behavioral stuff just went away. And what did it take? Yeah. I am an Englishman. Yes, I'm an American, born and raised. I fought in America's wars. Through and through, and I'm American, but I am a member of the English civilization, as all as all true Americans are. And that civilization goes back over 1,000 years, and really the component pieces of it, the older, far older heuristics go back thousands of years before that.
We got a question from Short Bus Mooner.
Well,
Did EM?
Yeah.
I know. It's a good question anyway. Did EM grow up in the city? The males in my quote unquote culture were championed. Friday Night Lights and all that type of stuff.
I didn't. I lived in the city a little bit when I was younger, but we lived way out. My mother moved us way out in the mountains of Washington, northern Washington, and then northern Idaho. We started in San Francisco and then Seattle. And I was born in Portland. Never lived there, but I was born in Portland. So I didn't get to cities and city life till I was a junior in high school. But most of this came from my mother, my European, Stade, Switzerland educated, Germany and UK and Scotland educated mother. But it was already in schools too, and it was in education, and it was on TV. It was already in TV in the 70s. Now, we didn't have a TV. I didn't see most 70s TV shows till mid to late 80s.
Yeah, there was a divorce. My dad remarried. My 3 sisters are from a different mom, although that mom raised me as well, and we're all very close. And there's a big distance in age. They're like more than 10 years younger than me mostly. So the reason I mentioned all of that was to lay the context for television.
Mm-hmm.
And I was given a lot of TV, video games, like I was allowed all that stuff. And boys are different. My dad always said it. My dad, who has 3 daughters, my sisters, say, when you have a son, you have to worry about your son. You only have to worry about one man. You got a daughter, you have to worry about every man in town. So I remember one of my sisters came down the stairs one morning at like 8 years old, dressed like some girl on TV, and my parents unplugged the TV and took it out of the house. And there was no television in our house like until not very long ago. And we don't let, my son has been allowed to watch, I think we let him watch like a 1970s Christmas special, like Jack Frost, like a year or two ago. Like they don't, the only time my son gets to watch TV is when Djokovic is playing tennis and my family's over watching it. Right.
Serbians.
So, but there's we don't do TV, and it's hard. It's really tough as a parent. Like if you think parenting is tough, try without TV. If you
We
think
didn't have
parenting is,
electricity, so TV wasn't an option for us.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you understand it. But
But
yeah,
that gave me totally sorry, I didn't mean to go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that my mother, for all my mother's faults, and she's still alive, so I don't want to speak too ill of her. For all of her faults and her own, she was going through immense pain herself. She also gave me extraordinary tools, and one of the things she did give me, quite despite herself, is a love for my people, for my civilization. At first, it didn't come, it was masked in all of this vitriol and anger and angst. But at the same time, she taught me about I do remember going miles away to the neighbor's house to watch now His Majesty, but then His Royal Highness and Princess Diana get married at 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was a big deal in our house, way up in the mountains I think we were way up in the mountains of Idaho at the time. Right. So quite despite the pain and suffering and pain, and the war my mother fought with her upper class mother for a decade and a half, despite all that, my mother still imparted all of this, sense of people in place. And she imparted all of these things to me quite despite herself. And then it took me another 30 years to come home. Not to her, but to these, to our civilization, our society, our culture, and our people. And everything makes sense now. I'm so much more at peace every day than I've ever been in years, because I don't feel like an orphan anymore. I belong to a people. And these people are great people, and they're a very old people, and they've done extraordinary things. And yes, they've made all kinds of mistakes, but that's how you become a great people.
Yeah. You know who else said recently that they were more at peace than they've been in years was Tommy on his podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said that with Joe Altman before I came on. I like to
Another
hear that.
Englishman, an Irish Englishman, but still an Englishman, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, Tommy's a good guy. We got to have him on this one. I'll usually go on his show, but we got to have him back on here too. Anyway, what is this? Adam Pickthall asks, what does EMC happening to the UK and EU over the next 10 plus years?
Hey, Adam. I see Adam stuff on Twitter every once in a while, usually pretty funny or pretty good. Either the English-speaking people stand up and throw their government off and survive, or they are led to the slaughter and not support. I wrote about this morning as well, several times, that they are led to the slaughter in the fields of Europe and are once and forever wiped from the planet, and or which will probably be in the form of the press gangs, forced into service at the point of a gun, like they're doing in Ukraine. That's a testing ground. And if they can, just look at the British police officers, and they're doing, they're throwing their people into jail for tweets. You think they won't throw you into a car and send you to the front line? And if there isn't enough, white Brits to do it, they'll get the immigrants to do it that they've imported. They'll just put them in uniform. That's an old pattern, by the way. So what do I see happen?
That's an old Roman conscript pattern.
It's an old Roman conscript pattern. It's not just Rome. Others have done it, China and others as well. It's just a conscription pattern at the utmost. So UK is the EU. I couldn't care less. That's my enemy. The Europeans are my enemy. They've been the enemy of the English-speaking people for thousands of years. Now, do I wish them ill? No. Right? Do I wish to see their destruction? No. Right? But they're not my problem. They're not my concern. Now, they like to convince us that we're the same people, that we're Western civilization. That's where all that comes from. Why? Because they want us, like we've done for the last 200 years, 300 years, they want us to continue to support their lifestyle at the expense of ourselves. We need to be done doing that. So what I do care about with respect to the question is what happens to the UK and Ireland specifically, because those are the homelands of our civilization. Those are where we come from. where all of these, most all these heuristics in the context was developed over thousands of years. And so either they're going to stand, in the UK specifically, the people need to peaceably, but the people in great numbers need to march on the crown, because the crown of England actually has executive powers, but they have to be forced to it. And they're threatened every day with knives at the throat of their family that, they will not act. They will not use royal prerogatives, royal constitutional rights, etc., to reset this problem. Well, they're never going to be able to do that if the people don't march on them in vast numbers and sustain the march, kind of like the Occupy Wall Street stuff that was going on here in the US, and thereby do two things: force the crown to exercise its executive prerogatives and rights and privileges, as well demonstrate to the crown, we the people have your back. When the government moves against you, when the knives in the dark move against you, we the people have your back. This is how the English-speaking people have been totally and absolutely corrupted since the 1620s, 1640s, really, that led to the beheading of a king. No king since has had any power. Why? Because the people and the king have never come together since, Cromwell. They put vast amounts of money in every year to make sure that we hate the royals, that we hate nobility. And then they've mounted war after war, to include the Napoleonic Wars and World War I, and then finally World War II, to kill off the nobility and anybody loyal to the nobility. So we English have to remember something. We English-speaking peoples, we are a monarchical people. Our kings are still here. Our king. Most of the noble houses are wiped out. President Trump went to the United Kingdom here recently. And what did he do? What did he make a point to do? He went to dinner in Windsor with the royal family. And he made a point twice to say that His Majesty King Charles is a good king, and that His Royal Highness Prince William will be a good king after.
Not much to say about Harry. I'm just joking.
I'm a big fan of Harry, and I believe very fundamentally, from a little inside bowl, shall we say, that Harry's dealing with some rather difficult things internally.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. Okay.
So you got to remember, Harry's a war fighter. Harry's been to war. He's a rough and tumble guy. People tend to get brain injuries in these things.
Okay. How would one properly address Harry? Would it be His
Royal Highness? He's still His Royal Highness. I don't care if they strip it away. He's still the prince.
Did they strip it?
No, I don't think they have it officially, but there is lots of movements to do that. And then, that's another thing. There's a vast amount of money spent every year, every day, on feeding this anti-Harry narrative. I'm going to tell you a little secret, people. It's always the bastard prince who comes back and saves the crown. Doesn't wear it, very rarely, sometimes, but it's always the bastards that come back and save. So back to Adam's question. Either the English-speaking peoples in the homelands, and that's also across the Commonwealth, right? So Australia, New Zealand, and Canada are going to stand up and throw their governments off by marching on the crown initially, and then backing the crown as the crown resets constitutionality and resets the power of parliament and resets the judiciary, which is all which has to happen. If that happens, the English-speaking people have extraordinary revival. If it doesn't happen, they're wiped out in the trenches of Ukraine over the next 2 years, never to return.
Well, I mean, that's dire, although it seems the civilization might live on in other places.
Yeah, but no civilization, no one is worthy of their ancestors. Nobody is worthy of any kind of acclaim whatsoever if they let their parents' house get overrun, if they allow their parents in their lifetime to fall. The British Isles are our homeland. That is our parents' house. Our parents are still alive. And if we allow them to fall, we have no credibility, no validity, no value whatsoever. We're shit children. And we can pat ourselves on the back all we want. But that's another one of those heuristics. You never dishonor your parents or your ancestors, much less when they're alive.
Well, we are at the end of the hour, EM. Are there any final thoughts?
No.
No, I know that was a nice, lovely note to end it on, but at the same time, sometimes there needs to be a smacking around.
You know, I have a teen daughter, and every once in a while I have to, say some unpleasant things to her because it's the only thing to get through, and because she needs to hear it. Now, she's doing extraordinary, and I don't want to imply any other thing, but even so, every once in a while, you've got to get somebody's attention because they're going down a pathway and they're not paying attention to the damage that's right there. It's 3 steps away, right? And it doesn't mean you tell them what to do. No, you get their attention. You say, okay, here's the 3 steps ahead of you. And if you don't change, if you don't look this and see this yourself in 3 steps, this is what's going to happen. And sometimes you have to actually take them off that path. Like I had to get her out of San Francisco and move her to Idaho. But then there's other times where you tell them that, you show them, and then you have to let them take 1 step, 2 steps, as they realize that, no, you didn't just tell them what to do. You were actually showing them how to look at it, how to read, what are the heuristics whereby to assess the signal, right? And then sometimes you even let them take the 3rd step and you let the thing happen.
Yeah.
Because they learn, because then they learn from you that you weren't trying to tell them what to do. You're trying to tell them how to approach it, how to analyze it, how to do cost benefit analysis. That's not what they teach in school. And that's a thing we need to do in our English civilization is all of that coding, all that cost benefit analysis, all the heuristics, all the signal processing, all the signals that we should pay attention to or not are all in our civilization.
Well, I can tell you my parents let me fail. And, at one point cut me off when I was, before most parents cut their college kid off anyway. And it was probably the best thing they did. I had to go out and I had to make it happen or I was going to starve and I didn't have anywhere to go.
My adopted parents have done that a couple of times.
Yeah.
It's the greatest thing that ever happened.
Yep. Yeah. And this all also speaks to civilization in a way. It's when you have a sink or swim situation, then if the individual, the child, if you will, can survive it, then they're in a certain way, they're bulletproof. You're never truly bulletproof, but whatever that lesson was, you don't forget that particular lesson. Right.
That's exactly true. The reason they're able to do that, though, is they gave you all the tools and they know they gave you the tools. But
I lacked context. And the only way that I could gain that context was without the training wheels.
Correct.
Yep. Great. That's lovely. EM, always a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Yep.
Obviously next 2 Thursdays are holidays. So, we probably won't be doing shows, but I'll tell you what, EM, if you want to come on a different day, we'd be glad to have you.
I appreciate it. But I've also got to get a bunch of work done here to get this ARG launched. This immersive world launched by the first of the year.
Lovely. All right. Well, everybody, thank you all for watching. EM, go ahead if you want to let everybody know how to find you or reach you. And I will not spew your wrong email this time.
EM Burlingame at pretty much anything. emburlingame.substack, EM Burlingame on Twitter, LinkedIn, held probably half a world of other things. But most of the work I'm doing is on Twitter now. That's more the author speaking, and then authorship itself is pretty much all on Substack. Although I do publish articles on Twitter as well, on X, and sometimes I do long form tweets if something comes to mind, or threads.
I don't want to say your best work, but your most fun trash talking type work is of course going to be on Twitter. So
on Twitter.
Yeah. Don't sleep on that, guys. Go check it out. You give them a follow. You won't be disappointed.
Happy holidays, everybody, and see you all next year.
All right, everybody. We will be back tomorrow with Velez. Looking forward to it.